Well, today, our conversations were about God's will as opposed to self-will. And for many of us, it's hard to tell the difference. It's hard for us to figure out, am I hearing the voice of God or am I hearing my own voice? And we talked about how we make that discernment, or how do we figure out that difference. And we said the first place that we have to start is that we have to understand the action that God takes, and then the response that we are to give. And we read a passage from Ezekiel, and that passage had 12 action words in it that God was going to do. He was going to take and replace and put, and he was going to be our God. And in response, we were to live and to do and to be. And we talked a lot about the fact that we have a hard time. We have a hard time when we don't understand things. We have a hard time living in the I don't know, or the I don't have it all figured out, or I don't have all the answers. In fact, many of us have been trained not to live that way. In fact, we've been trained to fake it until we make it. The problem with faking it until we make it in some instances is that we don't give God room to move. Because God needs to meet us in the I don't know. God needs to meet us in the I don't have the answers, or I can't figure this out. But if we're faking it, like we have got it figured out, or we can do it, then God can't meet us. And many times that's one of the biggest ways that we know that we're hearing our will and not God's will. Are you denying the I don't know? Are you denying living in the unknown? Do you feel that you've got to be God and you've got it all figured out? Now, many of us are in that same boat. We struggle in the same way. We look around and we don't know all the answers, and so we make stuff up. We look around and we don't have everything figured out, so we make things up to figure things out. And that's what's hard, because once we start doing that, then it's very easy for us to mistake our voice for God's voice, our will for God's will. And so the thing that we have to do is we've got to get good at following. We've got to get good at living in the I don't know, living in the I don't have it all figured out, living in the I don't have all the answers. And then God can meet us right there in that place. And He can help us to take a step. He can help us to learn something new. He can help us to be the very people that we're called to be. And this was the final point that we were talking about today, which is very interesting. And that is that it's not until we believe, it's not until we give our life to Christ can we ever be indwelled by the Holy Spirit. And not until we're indwelled by the Holy Spirit will we ever be able to figure out if it's God's voice or our voice. So in essence, there's this necessity on our part to respond to what God has already done by believing, so that we can figure out what God has already done and what He's going to do, so that we can be the people that we are called to be. And this runs straight in the face of many of the teachings that we have grown up with, and that is that you've got to earn God's love. You've got to be good enough. You've got to be righteous enough. Well, the problem with earning God's love is that you're trying to do something without the very power and order which to do it. It's like trying to drive a car without any gasoline in it. Got to put the gas in first before the car will move. You have to have the faith first before the Spirit will roll. You have to have the faith first before your cold stone heart will be replaced by a new heart. But that requires us to take a step of faith. And that step of faith requires us to live in the I don't know. I don't have it all figured out. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what to do. And for many of us, that's just a stumbling block that we can't get over. We can't bring ourselves to that place where we acknowledge that we can't do it on our own. But until we get to that place, we will never be able to discern the difference between God's voice and our voice. Until we get to that place where we can admit, I don't have it all figured out. We can get to that place that we can admit to say, I don't know everything, but I believe. Until we get to that place, the Spirit of God will never be able to be in us. And if the Spirit of God is never in us, we'll never be able to hear God's voice. And if the Spirit of God is never in us, we'll never be able to overcome anything. And if the Spirit of God is not in us, we'll never be able to be more than what we are today. So that's the first step. The first step is that we've got to believe. We've got to acknowledge the fact that we don't have it all figured out and we don't know everything. And in the midst of that, I don't know. In the midst of that, I don't have it all figured out. God will meet us, and He'll give us a new heart, and He'll put a new spirit in us. And we will learn how to discern His voice from our voice. Now, I hope you are able to get something out of this Hot Fudge Sunday this week. And it was a good worship service, smaller crew. The fact of the matter is that we're shrinking. And I think that's perfectly natural as we go through this process of reimagining ourselves, reinventing ourselves, revisioning ourselves. That I think that we're going to shrink before we grow. And that's understandable. And that's just a reality. So we're getting pretty small, even though this is supposedly the busy time of the year. We go at this pace, then that means this summer I might be talking to myself. And I laugh and I giggle because I know that there's something bigger than all of this, all of us going on right now. I have embraced the I don't know. I have embraced I don't have it all figured out. And I'm getting good at following. And I pray that you're able to get good at following too. And I pray that you'll come along on the journey with us. So as I say every week, I hope this week has a great you. And tune in next week for another episode of Hot Fudge Sunday as we continue to discern God's will.